Welcome in, everybody, to the Bare Knuckle Recovery Podcast. As always, we are your hosts. I'm Tommy Streeter. This is Nate Mollering. As you can see, we've got two guests today. We've got Zach Dawson, who is a part of the Bare Knuckle Recovery team. So anytime that you guys reach out to us on our Facebook page or call or email or anything like that, you may be talking to Zach. And then we've also got Dick Boggess. And I'm going to let Dick introduce himself and tell you everything he does because I can't keep it all. I can't keep in track.
Right. So retired therapist. I used to work at Fort Wayne Recovery. And now I'm clinical supervising at Allendale, which is a local detox facility, as well as participated in 3 different drug courts: Allen County with Judge Gall, Noble County with Judge Kramer, and DeKalb County with Judge Squiller. So I sit on 3 different drug courts every week, and see a lot of brand new people coming in trying to get clean and sober with the help of drug court. It's an awesome program. So
yeah, absolutely.
And you're in recovery yourself, right?
Yep. Just celebrated 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Did not know how not to drink or use when I first came in. Somebody said, don't do that. And that was a problem. So I went out and drank. And
yeah. Well, yeah, we thought it would be cool to have Zach and Dick on together because Zach and Dick have a little bit of history together when it comes to drug court, right? Yes. So we thought we'd let you guys talk about that a little bit. Zach, we'll start with you. Just tell a little bit of your story. So Zach's been on our podcast before, and he has told some of our story. But now that we're on TV and we have a lot bigger following than we did when Zach was on previously, we thought we'd let him come on again and just tell a little bit about his story and then get into drug court when you and Dick met, and then you guys can go from there. We'll talk about drug court. I know Nate has a lot that he wants to talk about when it comes to how involved the justice system is with recovery in general. So
yeah, probably not what you think either. So.
Probably not. Yeah. So yeah, that's what we'll be talking about today. So Zach, we'll start with you.
So I grew up here in Fort Wayne. I'm an addict. Pretty much struggled with any substance that's out there. But once I found heroin, nothing else mattered. I was in trouble a lot as a kid. And then from there, it just progressively got worse. Until I found prescription pills. Then when they took them off the market, I turned to heroin. Once I turned 18, I didn't want to get caught. So I was more sneaky. Until I got a bad batch of what I thought was heroin, but turned out to be fentanyl. I overdosed and was woken up by the police, and that led me to drug court. I got put on Allen County drug court, and that's when my case manager came in and said, Zach, you gotta stop using. For me, that was easier said than done. So I used for the first month and a half, and it was the Wednesday before I had court. It was about 2 weeks out from Christmas, and that's when I met Dick. I went into the Bowen Center, which he was teaching MRT at that time, and I went in to go do my intake, but I had just got done doing a bunch of heroin, and I walked into his office.
Off on the right foot right away.
Yeah.
Great first impression.
And I walked into his office. I was so confident in myself, and apparently I had started to nod out. And that's when I met the real Dick Boggess. Do you remember what you said to me?
I think I do, but I'm not so sure I could say it right now. But
yeah, Dick called me every single name in the book. And he really, really let me have it. He said, "How dare you walk into my office like this?" And he said, "You're not going to do this today." And basically said, I'll see you on court. You piece of crap.
Yeah.
And
were you shocked the therapist spoke to you that way? You weren't expecting that, were you?
No, not at all. And see, the thing is I didn't realize Dick was the teacher and a therapist. I thought he was just doing my intake. So I was like, it's just nobody important.
That guy's not important. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. And I, not knowing who he was really in the recovery world. But essentially he said, as I'm walking out, he said, "I'll see you in court on Monday."
Did he politely ask you to leave his office?
Oh, no. He told me to get the heck out of his office.
Is that what the
very,
word was?
very vulgar, though.
Yeah.
But
got your attention, though, didn't it?
It did. And that's when I knew, what was coming next for me. So Dick was the one who put the nail in my coffin. And because when I went to court on Monday, he actually was there in the courtroom.
Made good on his promise. Huh?
Yep. And that was the day that I was arrested. And that's where our relationship started. Because even after I got out of jail, I spent almost 3 months in jail in county. And then after that, I had to go to Park Center and do inpatient. And then after that, I went to a halfway house. And when I was at the halfway house, I went to the same place. I still had to do that class that he was teaching. And turns out I got Dick while
A completely different person showed up for my class. I couldn't believe that.
I didn't recognize
Just
him
the
hardly.
same guy that was in there 3 months ago.
Yeah. And, Dick was a huge part of my recovery because not only was he the one that showed me tough love, but he also showed me that he cared. And that's where the whole boundaries perception in my mind came into place, that somebody can tell me that I'm doing wrong, but they can also still show me love.
Do you think that you would have stopped using if that hadn't happened? If you hadn't got arrested, and then if Dick hadn't have spoken the truth to you and thrown your butt in jail, do you think you would have sobered up?
No, never. I didn't know how to. I was afraid to. I had been to treatment before, and honestly, that was the only thing that was going to stop me from using. And I knew it was coming eventually. I was trying to tell myself in my mind, oh, it's a week before Christmas, and they're not going to throw me in jail today. And
Right, because it's Christmas. Like,
yeah,
who does that?
I was very, very wrong.
Dick said, bah, humbug.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny when you're talking here, that story kind of rings for me because there was another guy that came in. He was on parole, and he did the same thing in my office. And I knew that if we drug tested him and he was positive, that we could possibly save his life by sending him back to prison. And so I took him down and did a drug screen on him. And as he's standing there nodding out at the urinal, I said to him, "You are a dead man walking." 2 days later, he was dead.
Yeah.
And so that's the difference in that story.
Yes.
You just never know.
You don't know.
You can't kid glove that type of situation.
No.
If you don't hear me, they don't hear me. And so,
Life or death.
yeah.
And I knew that jail was coming soon because I had been on drug court for a month and a half, used the whole time, failed every drug screen, barely went to classes, didn't go to AA. I was still running the streets, doing anything that I could. And it was, I think my wife stuck around because she didn't want to add to my baggage. But it was hard. You know, she didn't come see me when I was in treatment. She barely took my calls when I was in jail. The hardest thing that she did was she sent pictures of our daughter to me on a tablet that you get in jail. And she said, you know, this is what you're missing.
Yeah.
And it was her first teeth, her first Christmas. I almost missed her first birthday.
Wow.
It was a lot, but I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
Eventually, you know,
Yeah.
when I finally got out of jail and I went back to court, the judge told me, you know, I'm really happy to see you in this courtroom. And this was a private conversation in the middle of court. She came down from her stand and she said, I'm really glad to see you in this courtroom. She said, how are you feeling? And I'm just like, why is she asking me all these questions? And that's when it showed me like somebody still cares, even when I can't care about myself.
Yeah.
Because she said, you know, when I sentenced you to jail, I thought you were a goner. She said you had absolutely no emotion. You didn't cry, you didn't laugh, you didn't say anything. It was just you put your arms behind your back and you walked away. She said typically when people are at that stage in their life, they don't come back here.
They've given up, huh?
Yeah. And I had a whole team standing behind me working through this whole process and trying to get me another chance. And because even then they weren't sure if they were going to give me another chance.
Yeah.
But going back to, you know, being in Dick's class, when I was doing MRT, I've done it before. That was the first time that I really took it seriously.
It's because you didn't want to get yelled at again, huh?
Well, and kind of,
Go to
but
jail.
I was doing it sober for like understanding things and Dick wasn't even going to pull no punches for me because my very first time doing my the first step, you
Testimony.
have to memorize it and hit all these points. And I tried it and he stopped me. Typically, the instructor is not supposed to stop you, but he stopped me
It was that
and
bad,
said,
huh?
"Just sit down. We'll try it again next week." And I'll never
I'm glad
forget
you
that.
guys see it funny right now because there wasn't anybody laughing
yeah.
at it.
Well, we can laugh about it now because
Yeah.
Zach's sitting here.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in the middle of me doing MRT, Dick had actually accepted a new position at Fort Wayne Recovery. And he took the job and left. And but I still had, that slow contact because he was still a part of drug court. And then later on down the road, when I was graduating drug court, my case manager sat me down and she said, "So what's next for you? Like, are you going to go back out and use? Are you going to continue with this lifestyle?" And I said, I wasn't looking for any handouts and I didn't know what I was going to do. But my recovery had become such a passion for me that I thought, this is kind of what I want to do with my life. And I didn't have a plan. I didn't have an idea of what I was going to do. And she said, "Well, how serious are you about this?" And I said, I'm serious. I don't have, I'll figure it out. And because I thought I might want to go work at Park Center or something like that. And she said, "Well, would you mind if I made a phone call for you?" And I said, "Sure." And she made one phone call, and that was to Mr. Dick Boggess here. And his words were, "Get your ass over here." And I became a tech and then, moved up from there. So that's pretty much the end of my story. I've been with Fort Wayne Recovery and Allendale Treatment for going on 4 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's
4 years.
Been a while.
Yeah.
And you started out as a behavioral health tech at Fort Wayne Recovery.
Started second shift behavioral health technician, which is the entry level program or entry level
Position.
And then I worked my way to first shift, which is actually a really big deal. And then from there, I was lead tech. And then after lead tech, I was the operations manager. And then after operations manager, I was asked to join the community outreach team. So now my job is to help connect people with treatment or any recovery-related services.
And you go to drug court now in Fort Wayne, right? In Allen County, and you advocate for people and help those people now, that were in your position.
Yep. Luckily, with Dick's help, because he is still a liaison for drug court, we talk very often, and it's to get people from drug court to treatment or whatever they're looking for.
That's great.
So
That's really awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, the tech position that he took is like gold for somebody brand new in recovery because, when we first come into recovery, it's all about us. And the more I think about me, the worse I get. And so if I'm thinking about helping somebody else, oh my God, I'm not worried about what's going on in my life so much that I get paralyzed. And so it's a great win-win for both sides because we need people that know what they're doing in their own recovery, at the same time can help. They know exactly what the person that is coming in is feeling and thinking and all those things. And so we can help in that area. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Dick, how long have you been with Allen County Drug Court?
So I started in Noble County maybe 20 years ago, and probably Fort Wayne or Allen County Drug Court maybe the last 15 years or so.
And then DeKalb County, how long?
And DeKalb, maybe the last couple of years with DeKalb. I just joined them,
Yeah.
It's great. I mean, I love drug court. Zach's a perfect example of what can happen and does happen on a regular basis. We see it all the time. When we come in and we can't tell the truth, we don't know. One of the things they always say is be honest with yourself. And that's the hardest. I've been lying to myself since I was 4, and now all of a sudden you want me to be honest with myself. It's not quite as easy as people like to suggest, but it's all good.
That's great. Yeah, and I mean, there's been a lot of success throughout the years, but I'm sure there's been a lot of people that have also not found as much success, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, how important is it for you as somebody who's been in that field that long and seen so many people come and go to have a story like Zach's?
Well, what was Zach's would have never been able to rally the way he did without the support of a drug court team.
Yeah.
That drug court concept is, when we're out there, it's us against the world.
Right.
Now when we come into drug court, and it takes about a month or two for them to realize that, because every time I sat in front of the judge before, it was always to go to prison or to go to jail or to,
Yeah.
But now all of a sudden I'm starting to realize slowly that, hey, wait a minute, they really do care.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't believe this.
Yeah.
So you got a team of people, therapists, AA people, NA people, all the people in the recovery community are there to help. Mm-hmm. And for the first time, he gets to see, oh my God, there are people just like me a little bit further down the road who are actually doing recovery. Right. Because I never saw anybody before I came in here. Yeah. I never saw anybody who didn't drink or use.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the idea that, wait a minute, this whole room of people don't drink or use and are laughing and caring. Yeah, it was such a weird concept for me.
For somebody who doesn't really know what drug court is, if you could explain to them, how do you become eligible for drug court? How do you get put on drug court? And then when you're on it, what does it kind of look like?
So it's not a simple program, but what it does, it's designed to rehabilitate without just sending them to jail. And so we staff somebody gets a felony. Tommy gets a felony. He's not a felony guy. Right. Maybe he is a felony guy. We have people that come in with a sheet that says they've got 15 felonies and finally they're ready. Either way. And so what drug court allows us to do is work really strongly with that participant. And then if they're successful in graduating, which is a year and a half in some courts, 3 years in other courts, you have the opportunity to get your felony expunged off of your record, so that if you don't want a felony on your record, this is it's a little bit of work, but it's also a great way to recover.
So it's not punitive in nature. It's a court of grace, right, and of mercy, basically.
Right.
Saying we're going to show you for a year and a half how to live, because probably a lot of people come to drug court and either they've forgotten how to live in society as a functioning member, or some people I'm sure never been taught.
Just never have.
Yeah, never have.
They come from a family where you start doing drugs when you're 8 years old.
Sure.
You don't take care of your kids.
Nope.
You don't like the police. You don't follow social. You don't pay taxes. You don't do any of that stuff. You get what you can get out of life. So I'm sure, can you explain how kind of the drug court team rallies around them and what the different pieces are and what that looks like when somebody comes in?
When you mentioned grace, a lot of grace goes on, because when we first come into drug court, we don't know what we're doing. And so there's okay, hang on a second, come back here. Before, when we would not know what we're doing, we would drift off. We would just drift off and never be seen again. Now we got somebody that says, no, come back here for a second. You got to go talk to Dick, or you got to go talk to Zach, or you got to go talk to your therapist, or you got to go talk to. And so if you continue to say F you to the grace that you keep giving, then they'll say, hang on a second, let's recalibrate this thing. Maybe this isn't the best thing for you. And then they'll spend a little time in jail.
Zach, case in point.
Yep. And then they'll say, okay, now do you want to do this, or do you want to just go ahead and finish out your jail term? Amazingly, you guys, some of them will finish out their jail term. It's easier for them to sit in jail for 9 months, a year, rather than this hard work of recovery.
And the thing about it is what people don't understand is, to be able to get onto drug court, you have to plead guilty to all of your crimes. So for me, I had 3 felonies. I had possession of heroin, possession of a syringe, and a theft charge on top of that. So I had to plead guilty to all 3 of those charges. But if I were to be kicked out of the program or something like that, I would then have – those crimes will automatically stick because I've already pled guilty to them.
Yeah, you pled guilty.
Right. Yeah, and you play this game of Russian roulette. You can get all these felonies, but if you complete the program, they will all be dismissed.
Which is a wonderful carrot to hang out there in front of me. If I'm a struggling drug addict or alcoholic and I have the opportunity to get this expunged from my record, that in of itself is a starter, if you will. And we all need starters. We do. There's people that are out there right now that are listening to this or watching this and they're thinking, oh my God, it's either me or it's my fill in the blank.
Yep.
They need help.
Yep.
I need help. I don't know how to get started.
Yeah.
And so drug court's an opportunity.
Right.
We don't all have to go to drug court
Right.
or need drug court because we haven't been arrested yet. A lot of people, unbelievably, will run this to the place until they finally run out of bullets or ammunition.
Right.
In my case, I didn't have to go to prison.
Right.
I was luckily I was told
Yeah.
you might want to. Lovingly, I was told, kind of like Zach was told, but I didn't want to lose my kids. That was my.
Right.
I didn't care about anything. Anything else was okay, but it was the kids that got me in that door. I was like, oh, I'll give it a try. So
Yeah.
and then amazingly, I walked in and there were people that were like, oh my God, they're telling my story and they don't even know me.
Yep.
It's crazy.
I think it's cool that drug court has kind of that roadmap for people, right? Like if you don't know how to do it, that's okay. We'll teach you how to do it and really lay out for you the steps, how to get your life back together. And I think it's kind of also worth mentioning, and I think it's rather profound, that in order to start drug court, you have to plead guilty, because what is one of the core principles of recovery, which is honesty. Whereas, typically with criminals, it's like, I didn't do it. Well, let me tell you why. They're screwing me, man. Look here.
Yeah. The system's against me.
It was in my pocket, but the other guy gave it to me and I was walking out. He told me that he paid for it. I didn't know. You need to go arrest that guy or this cop. He's got it out for me. And you're basically saying like, yeah, I broke the law. And also you're saying I have a drug problem. I'm an alcoholic.
It's an incredible start. Yeah.
It's freeing. And it's almost kind of like I'm sure most people, when they're sitting there and they have to plead guilty, it's scary and doesn't feel this way. But ultimately, it's like a weight lifted off of you because you're like, okay, I don't have to hide crap anymore. Right. And this is who I am. This is where I'm at in life. Most of the people probably in the drug court program that are helping out have been in some kind of situation like that. And they can help walk you through like, hey, your life's not over completely. It's going to be okay. And I think that's really cool that it's structured that way. And I think a lot of people still view drug court as like this punitive kind of like, we're going to hit you with a hammer type of thing, when really people are big on diversion programs. It's a diversion program.
Yep.
The goal is to get you to be a happy, healthy, functioning member of society that's contributing in a positive way, right? Not to put you in jail.
Right. Nobody wants to put anybody in jail, but sometimes it helps.
Yes,
that's the dilemma that the judge faces every time somebody makes a mistake. Is this person just giving up? Because what we won't do is give up on them until they give up.
Right.
If the judge sees them giving up, then there's not a whole lot we can do.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like we'll walk with you, but we can't carry you. We can't drag you across the finish line, but we'll walk with you.
So much is available. If you're struggling out there, so much is available.
Yeah.
You just gotta. And drug court's not the only option, but it's definitely one that works and one that gets people into treatment and all this sort of thing.
Well, how often do we hear from people that say going to jail is what saved their life?
Yeah.
Like because they could not stay sober on their own.
Yeah.
Going to jail where getting high is not an option, or shouldn't be an option at least, or it's a little bit harder, whatever. Yeah. That's what saved their life. That's what kickstarted their sobriety. That's what kickstarted their recovery. We hear that all the time. And I know that's part of the reason that you're so pro justice system when it comes to recovery in general.
It's like Zach just mentioned, so many times people will do an assessment for drug court under the influence. They have an assessment for drug court and cannot go in not under the influence. And that's where drug court comes in and puts them in a detox facility, puts them somewhere that can get physically 30 days under their belt so they get their sea legs underneath them. And so now the physical part is removed, and now we have to work on the mental side. And that's what I'm working on here 30 years later, and what you guys are all working on. It's what we have to do to continue to stay afloat.
Absolutely. Yeah. So before we continue this conversation, I think we're about out of time for today. So we're going to film a part 2 of this episode where I'm assuming we will probably continue talking about the justice system and then how that's paired with intervention and prevention. I have a feeling that's where this conversation is going.
It is.
So if you guys want to tune in next episode, or if you're listening on the podcast, we'll go ahead and finish it right now. But that will be it for today's episode. So Zach, Dick, thank you guys for coming.
Thank
Nate,
you.
Thank you. And we'll see you guys next time. So right before we ended the last episode, we were kind of getting into the conversation about how the justice system is paired with intervention and prevention to kind of make this whole, what was the terminology that you used when we talked about that before? Like the three different pillars and how they all,
I
let you explain
I talk about like a stool and the 3 legs of
right,
the stool.
That's
and,
what it was.
You know, a 2-leg stool is not very, very stable, but 3 legs, at least you can get it to stand upright. And I think all 3 of those pillars are vitally important for this solution. And I think the justice part of it, and drug court's a part of the justice part of it, right? And you get justice and intervention kind of overlap quite a bit. And then obviously prevention overlaps with intervention to a certain degree as well. But I mean, you know, intervention is basically, I'll explain the 3 parts. The justice system is pretty self-explanatory, right? That's the police, that's the judges, that's the law. Intervention is your people who have a problem and we need to intervene and stop that problem from progressing and then ultimately put it in remission, right? We want to put the addiction in remission, get to the core of the issue and heal that person, restore them to the individual we all know they can be and we love them, right? Prevention is stopping people before they even get started, right? Which is that's
a tough one.
That's the dream, right?
Yeah.
That's when you're going to the schools telling kids drugs are bad, you know, but you know, we all know how that goes, right? So we're always working on these better forms of prevention to try to help kids and adults too. Let's be honest, prevention happens at the adult level quite often as well. To think that children are the only ones susceptible to drugs for the first time is completely ludicrous. But today, what I primarily focus on is justice, because I think a lot of recovery advocates focus heavily on intervention and prevention.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are very down on the justice piece, almost like they want to kind of downshift away from the police and judges and laws having anything to do.
Well, they do. They definitely do, because they look at it as we're punishing these people for being sick, right?
Well, the literal term that they use is we're criminalizing drug use. We're criminalizing an addiction, right? I think people misunderstand what addiction is, okay? Drug use is a symptom of addiction. It's not addiction in and of itself. Right. Addiction is that I have a hole in me that I can't fill, so I fill it with stuff, right? You know, it could be a symptom of that could be that I eat too much cake, too many donuts, you know, or it could be I drink too much beer, I shoot too much heroin, I watch too much porn, I gamble too much. It could be any of those things. The symptom in and of itself is what is criminalized, and it's criminalized for a reason, right? When we say, and this is a big thing too with like homeless shelters, right? They say, oh, it's too high barrier. We need low barrier, no barrier shelters. Saying someone can't be under the influence to come in is literally discriminating against that person for having something that they didn't choose, which is addiction. Okay, let's break that down real quick. The person is not being criminalized because they choose to drink alcohol. It's because what happens when alcohol's in their system.
Yes.
That's what gets me put in jail. It's not the fact that I'm drunk. It's because when I'm drunk, I think I can fight the cops or I can beat anybody up.
And when I was doing heroin, when I was high, I wasn't bugging anybody.
Right.
Like, I was by myself, sitting in my car, on the bed or on my couch or whatever, not bothering anybody. But what I had to do in order to get money to buy the heroin is what the problem was. I hurt a lot of people. I stole a lot of stuff. I stole a lot of money, physically hurt people.
Can I just step in right there?
Yeah.
Because there's a similarity that we all have, and people watching or listening to this has. I'm not hurting anybody. I don't know what the big deal is here.
I'm only hurting me.
Every one of us thought that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful point.
But then look at Zach's story. So Zach, when you were sticking a needle in your arm, and were you only hurting yourself?
At the time, I thought I was. But
Right.
But your family, though,
Yeah.
especially your wife and your daughter. And
I mean,
your daughter was young. She
yeah.
didn't know, but your wife, for sure, your parents. I mean, we
But
put our parents through hell.
my daughter was affected by it because towards the end of my addiction, before I went to my first treatment facility, I literally had stolen everything out of the house.
Wow.
And took it to the pawn shop. My wife called me and she said, "What is going on?" And then even after that, I said, "Well, I need $300 more to get high, and I have to pay some people off, and then I'll go to treatment."
Right.
And it was no. I mean, she said, we can't even buy diapers for our daughter."
Right.
And and she had just found out that I had took out $40,000 worth of loans.
Oh my gosh.
And spent all that on drugs. I was hurting a lot of people. We didn't even know if we would be able to make our mortgage.
And so then there's a lot of people who would say, you know, my drinking, my drug, and I never stole anything I never stole anything. So people focus too much on things of financial value. What I always say is, I stole things that were my parents and they didn't give a damn about the PlayStation or the earrings. You know what they cared about? I stole time.
Right.
I stole serenity. I stole joy. I stole sleep. I stole love in the home, because when I wasn't doing well, nobody's doing well. Mom and dad are fighting. Sister that's 7 years younger is watching them fight. She's crying. She's not getting the attention she needs, right? So we have this like idea that if we like decriminalize drugs or make them, let's just make them all legal. Let's just let everybody buy weed at the corner store, buy heroin at the liquor store, buy cocaine, and then there'll be no more victimization because nobody's going to get arrested. So then people will get caught in the system. People miss the entire point of how people destroy other people's lives in addiction. Right? Oh, let's just get rid of OWIs because then we're criminal. People smash into people and kill them. And it's the same thing with substances. It's not that we're discriminating against you because you have alcohol in your system. It's the behavior that occurs when you're under the influence. And that for every one person or for every 10 people that can drink a beer or drink a fifth of liquor even and not punch anybody in the face or not go steal anything, there's at least one or two other people that can't handle it. Right. And that's why you have to have laws. That's why you have to have boundaries. And that's why ultimately the justice system, I think it's important that drugs to a certain extent remain illegal, at least certain ones, right? Like I'm still not big on, I'm not a big proponent of legalizing marijuana, and I have reasons for that, right?
No,
which we have talked about before.
We have.
If you want to hear it, go to the website.
Yeah.
You know, it's bad enough alcohol is legal. You know, a lot of people talk. Okay, so here's one of the people use prohibition as a reason to say that decriminalization or legalization. Well, what they say is prohibition didn't work. That is a flat out lie. So there was a sensationalized small percentage of the population engaged in violence. Okay, you had the gangland murders. You had bootleggers shooting the crap out of each other. That was like 0.001% of the population. Yes, you had a rise in homicides, but it was relatively small, and it was pretty much contained to the people who were involved in those criminal enterprises, right? So people say if you drive it underground, it creates a black market. That's true, but it was a fairly isolated black market, right? Mm-hmm. What we did see during that time frame was the rates of alcohol-related death when it comes to OWIs, when it comes to suicides, when it comes to domestic violence, when it came to homicides, when it came to things like liver disease, kidney disease, they plummeted drastically. Yeah. We had a healthier population than we ever had. Now, I am not advocating we ban alcohol because there'd be riots in the streets in America would be burned to the ground overnight. Right? So I understand that's a losing battle. And I understand, you know, people are adults, they can make their own decisions. But why would we make the same mistake with things like heroin and things like marijuana? We're already seeing in states that legalize marijuana that the rate of death when it comes to automobile accidents rises sharply. Mm-hmm. The rate of people calling poison control, especially adolescents, showing up at emergency departments with overdoses, kids with marijuana-induced psychosis, is at an all-time high. Okay, we need to learn from these things. So you're never going to convince me that making heroin legal, the argument is, then people won't be, we will unclog the justice system. No. And then nobody will put fentanyl because you'll be able to buy heroin legally. First of all, when you look at the drug cartels, they're a multi-trillion-dollar industry. They're not going anywhere. Right. Just like with weed, we're like, oh, if we legalize weed, they're not going to sell weed. People just people buy the legal containers, and then so they get the container that makes it legal, and then they go to Billy Bob down the road and go buy weed from him because it's $50 cheaper than the super hydroponic, you know, hipster weed that's $800 a freaking gram. Right? So that's what they're doing. And the same thing is true with fentanyl. You're still going to have fentanyl. These perk 30s in the street are $2 a pill. Right. You're not going to be able to undercut that cost. I don't care who you are with heroin in a store. So I think it's incredibly important that the justice system has the ability to come into somebody who is completely not only destroying their life, but destroying the life of their family, right? And let's say you don't have a family, and let's say, you know, because everybody goes to these outlier examples. Well, what if I don't have a family? And, you know, what if I don't have a criminal record? And, you know, what if I'm independently wealthy? You can always find something that you're doing which is taking away from society when all you do all day is sit on your couch and get high, right? Like you're not reaching your full potential, and so you're robbing everybody around you from that max potential that you have, right? You could be doing something productive, and I think that's a big part of what people don't realize is whether you think you're hurting people or not, you really are at the end of the day. You have a personal responsibility to be the best version of yourself. And I don't believe for 1 second people say, oh, well, if this guy wants to be smoke medical marijuana and be on methadone, and that's all he wants to do all day, that's better than him shooting fentanyl. It is, but to what degree, right? Like, I believe in you more, that you were created for more in this world. You have more of a purpose than being strung out on drugs that are prescribed to you that make you barely functionable in life and that completely set your potential to the lowest common denominator. I believe that you're capable of more and you were created for more, right? So this idea that we're just going to take the justice system out of it, you're going to have way more deaths. How many people can we think of, all probably sitting here right now, that we know? I could probably name 20 people who, if the justice system hadn't stepped in their life, they would be dead or they'd be homeless living under a bridge. And you can take that number and multiply it by 100, the people that they impact. The people that Zach has impacted, the people that you've impacted, the people that Tommy's impacted. Even on a daily or weekly basis, that number is almost too high to count. Right, and
if it weren't for the justice system, they wouldn't be able to be there for us to have the opportunity to help them.
Exactly.
So that's the beautiful part of drug court, from my perspective, is it allows us, through the help of some heavy hand, to help the people get to where they need to be. Somebody comes into my office, they don't want to be there. And whenever I see somebody that comes into my office that doesn't want to be there, I see me. I didn't want to be here, but something was going on in my life that needed changed. I didn't know how to change. If I hang around with you guys together, oh my God, I can change. But by myself, I didn't have a chance. I didn't stand a chance.
Well, and there's this whole idea that endless empathy and validation creates recovery, right? That as long as we just pat people on the head and we don't upset them and we make them feel loved, that they're just one day going to say, you know what, I'm just going to quit using drugs. And I don't see that to be the case.
No.
Endless validation and empathy creates disability, right? And like I said, what the justice system can come in and do and say, we caught you using this substance that is illegal because it's so harmful, not just to you, but to society, that we're going to tell you can't do this anymore.
If we wait around for people to want to get recovery, it'll never happen.
Never happen.
Yeah.
Never happen.
And, Dick and I were actually just talking earlier this week or last week about, there was an article that came out about forced recovery and how it doesn't work. If this forced recovery through the justice system didn't happen to me, I wouldn't have 5 years sober today.
Yeah.
Your kids wouldn't have a dad.
Yeah.
Your wife wouldn't have a husband.
And it's, none of that. Because I remember earlier in the episode you were saying that if you were to ask somebody when they're going to stop, I remember my answer because I laughed about it and I said, probably when I'm dead. Mm-hmm. And that was the honest truth.
Absolutely.
Like it was, I had just got done overdosing in my car and woke up to a cop knocking on my window.
Right.
Like that's not okay. And that also hurt the lady who had to call the police on me.
Right.
Because she was afraid that I was dead in that car.
Right. Yeah.
And then I had to waste the EMT's time to come out and try to assess me, but I'm saying, no, I'm fine. It's more than just that one person.
The similarity that Tommy mentioned earlier, as he's telling his story, I'm thinking, I didn't have to do all those things to get my foot in the door of recovery. And thank God for that, because I tell so many people, you do not have to go further down. You don't have to go back to jail. You don't have, or jail for the first time. You don't have to get an OWI. The elevator keeps going down. We can decide to get off whenever we want, or whenever somebody lovingly suggests get off the elevator. And so, it's crazy how but there's plenty of floors further down the road that. And so many people will say, well, I haven't been underneath the bridge yet. I'm in great shape. Yeah. Or I haven't lost my job. Or I even had my wife tell me that I need to do something. But I knew long before, Tommy, you knew long before we started to even attempt to change that I needed to change.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
crazy. Yeah, I just read in the book just the other day, I said, in one of the lines, it says that he really wants to stop. And that line leapt out to me because I really wanted to stop. 8 years before I walked into my first AA meeting.
It's not about wanting to stop, is it, Nate?
8 years.
Well, I got that from Dick, so I use your saying all day. It's not your saying. You even got it from somebody because you told a story about a guy. You told a story about there was a guy that came to Freedom House all the time.
Right.
He couldn't stop using spice to save his life. And one night, I think it was Sid, you said, told the guy, get the F out of here and don't come back. And he started crying. He said, but Sid, I really need this. And Sid looked at him and he said, you know what? Recovery is not for those who want it or need it. It's for those who do it. Get the F out. Mm-hmm. And that is so profound. And people say, well, that's a horrible story. Nate, he kicked the guy out when he needed help. No, he was saying it doesn't matter if you need it or you want it. Are you going to do it? That guy had everything he needed to stay sober. And he chose to get impaired and come into the house with other people at risk. All he had to do was put one foot in front of it. And I know it's simple, but it's not easy. And I know that.
So when there's a fire and the house is on fire, like I asked my very first meeting, why do I do this? And I wanted to know why I did what I did. And Spook lovingly said to me, your ass is on fire, Dick. Do you want to know why? Or do you want to put it out?
Right.
And that was the time instantly I became a put it out guy. I don't care why I did what I did when I was 7 years old. I don't care what happened to me when I was 15. I want to put it out.
Right. So it's funny, Nate uses that saying all the time. Recovery is not, I mean, I do too after hearing him say it all the time. Yeah. Probably every day we say that to somebody. But then the other thing that you just said is, do you want to figure out why your ass is on fire or do you want to put it out? I heard you say that to somebody in your office one time, and I use that one all the time too.
It's great.
It was magic to me because that got my attention.
Yeah. And eventually, if you start putting the fire out, you will find out why you started your ass on fire in the first place.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It'll come to you.
And that'll come plenty of down the road. But it's like when the fire truck comes up to the house on fire.
They don't ask why.
They go, why is it on fire?
Can you tell me how the fire started before we put it out?
But then what happens is after it's put out, then they look at the cause.
Right.
But not until the fire's well out. Yeah,
right.
Great point.
Yeah. Right. And I mean, that's the thing. I mean, so basically people are just saying we should let houses burn down, you know?
Right.
And that, again, I come back to, thank God, you know, people say, oh, well, you know, this person got arrested for possession and now they're in the justice system. But thank God for that, because Zach got arrested after he overdosed. If you just would, if somebody would have just Narcaned you and sent you on your way, God knows if you would have overdosed again.
Well, that was actually the case because when I got done, because the officer just knocked on my door and I finally woke up and he said, look, man, if it was up to me, I just let you go. You're up, you're awake. He said, but the lady who called the cops on you actually called the narcotics division and they want to talk to you now.
Oh boy.
And if it wasn't for that woman, and I still have no idea who that is today, if it was not for her,
maybe she'll hear this.
Yeah, please get a hold of me. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah.
But if it wasn't for that woman calling the narcotics division, I would have walked right out of there.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you know what? I would have used that same heroin that I just overdosed on.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. I mean, it sounds really good and educated and very new worldy to say, you know, well, that's Jack's choice if that's what he wants to do. We just need to make sure he's as safe as possible when he does it.
But let me just jump in there real quick. He says if he wouldn't have done something, he would have went right back and used the exact same heroin that he overdosed on earlier. What's the difference between that and going right back and having that vodka and Coke? Exact same thing.
It is. Yeah. But that's, again, I know I keep saying this, but that's why the justice system it's so important that they're able to intervene on people, because we won't do it for ourselves. Mm-hmm. You know, so it's actually a good thing that people get arrested. And there is this huge idea out there that we shouldn't call the police on anybody and there should be no penalty for any of this stuff. And, you know, at the same time, I'm a big proponent of harm reduction. Mm-hmm. I'm not against the clean needle program. I'm not against giving people Narcan. I understand if someone's dead, we can't treat their addiction. We can treat addiction, we can't treat death. I fully agree with all of that. I do, but I also think that it's important for there to be accountability for people, right? You have to be held accountable. And that's another thing too, where if you commit a crime under the influence, yes, you're sick and you have a disease. I get that. But it doesn't change what you did. You still got to answer for what you did.
One of the things that drug courts helps Zach do, and it helps everybody that's in there, it helps us place or change people, places, and things.
Yes.
That accountability, if I stay with the same people that I used to run with before when I got sober, if I continue with them, they would hold me accountable
in a
to
different
keep
way.
coming back.
That's right.
Right? And
Yeah.
so I need a different group of people. That's what I find when I'm
And you know, when I got on drug court, everybody was telling me not to get on drug court because it's such a hard program. It's set up for failure, this and that.
Right.
The only reason that it is ever set up for failure is because they hold you accountable. If I didn't have those types of things, I wouldn't have learned how to be able to survive.
Right.
I mean, drug court gave me my entire life back.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that one thing that a lot of people, again, they miss the boat on is the accountability piece, right? There is evidence, and I'm a big believer in, the work of Dr. Ann Lemke, who wrote the book Dopamine Nation, that, Remedy Live uses for their Get Schooled tour and all kinds of great books. She's the, I'll probably butcher her title, but she's the chair of addiction medicine at Stanford University, their medical school, right? And she's a psychiatrist, been in practice for years, private practice, all these things, but she talks at great length about the fact that people who tell themselves that they're victims in their own story don't recover. When it's always everybody else's fault, we are not able to move on with life. I talked to a guy one time who got arrested, and he got arrested because his car got searched, and there were drugs in it, but they weren't his drugs. They were the guy who he was with was a drug dealer, but he said that they didn't know that. How would they have known, that he had drugs in the car? And he said that, basically that they had got profiled. And I said, well, if you were hanging out with that guy, would you got pulled over and would they have searched your car? And he said, no. I said, so you knew exactly what you were doing. You knew who you were hanging out, right? You knew who this guy was. It's the same thing when we keep going back to the same people, places, and things, and then we all wonder why we keep falling back in. And so many people talk about that it's, there's even a movement that we get away from the whole people, places, and things, because now you're asking people to give up their family. You're asking people to give up their associations they've had their entire life. And, the opposite of addiction is human connection. But I would argue those people who you're running with, they can't really have a legitimate human connection. I didn't know what human connection was till I got sober. And the reason I started getting high in the first place was because I feel like I didn't connect to my fellow humans anyway. Right. And alcohol and drugs were a social lubricant. And then I would create this false sense of connection. I would get this huge burst of dopamine. And then I'd say, oh, I feel so connected with everybody when I'm high and when I'm drunk. And I get along with everybody so well. And I don't have social anxiety. But the minute I would sober up, first of all, I was embarrassed because all the crap I said was probably stupid. I thought it was way funnier than it was. And it
Or
really
mean.
wasn't. Right. Or mean. Right.
I was a very mean drunk.
Right. Yeah. I wasn't a mean drunk, but I was just stupid. I just did a lot of dumb stuff. That made me look like an idiot. So we have
Still
this.
does that.
Oh, right. Well, that's just my nature. I'm just, you can lead a horse to water, but, can't make him drink. So, it's really about having real human connections. And I think that really happens when you're around people who are actually individuals who are living on purpose, right? They live intentionally and they have a purpose in their life. And, it has to be a purpose that, in my opinion, is something that gives back to the world, because we know that recovery is a lot about giving back, right? It's about constant thought of others. And in my addiction, I was entirely selfish. And that's how you get that victim mentality, though, is when you keep thinking about me, I need to feel better. And that's, again, like that, like I like to highlight, that's how I got in addiction in the first place, because I was so focused on feeling better and my feelings that at one point, Zach, you were using heroin. You didn't care how it affected your daughter and your sons and your wife, right? And I was the same way with my family. It was just, I need to feel better. So,
well, you talked earlier about this hole, this, and it's spiritual in nature. It's what it is. And I had this emptiness inside of me that I had no idea how to fill until I saw Spook or somebody else help another human being. I thought, oh my God, look at what he's been able to do now because he's sober. And then it becomes spiritual in nature. If I help you, I feel good. Now, I don't feel good, that instant gratification that we get from a substance, but I feel good.
It's fulfillment is what it is.
A happiness that I've never felt.
Yeah, and there's no hangover.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I haven't spent $50 at the bar.
Yeah. So $50 somebody else's money.
Right.
Usually too.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I think we're about out of time. Is there any last comments?
Well, the other part of the justice thing for me, again, and this is a whole nother episode we could talk about, is, part of the problem with the United States and our current crisis is the drug supply is so vast. And it has changed so much. And fentanyl was so deadly. So, everyone says, congratulations, drug, for winning the drug war. Well, I think part of that is just because we haven't had the right focus on the drug war. We're not going after the right drugs. And I think we need to do it a different way, but that's a whole other
Yes,
conversation.
that is
for a
an
whole nother
entirely
day.
different conversation that we will have another day.
Right.
So
Anyway, but
yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys again, Zach and Dick,
Thank you.
for joining us. That was a great conversation.
Yep.
All right. Well, that'll do it for today. So thank you guys for watching. Make sure you're following us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all that good stuff. And thank you for tuning in.